The way they lay it out is they underline, as you can see right here, the main thing that they're going to talk about here in this next section. And they're having a problem with the history of the discovery. And they say on April 16th, the defense came to the court and requested all the evidence that the state has against George. Typically, the state would just go ahead and provide that information, but I think they had to go through and redact a bunch of stuff, and I don't even know why they were redacting. Generally, that's left for the defense will redact anything that the judge suggests is not to be released to the public. I mean, the idea is that the defense gets all the information, right? That's the plan. So they ask on the 16th of April for the information, and nearly a month later, the defense or the state finally provides a discovery exhibit. So here on May 14th, and I remember this well, we were discussing it here on YouTube, we thought that was what the state had. We didn't realize that they were holding back so much. A lot of people that support Trayvon and hope that George goes to prison for life were assuming that the information that was being withheld was information that would prove George's guilt. But in reality, if the state has information that proves George's guilt, they would definitely provide that because they want the public's opinion on their side. So we know whatever they're withholding is helping George and not hurting him. And the little bit that we finally found out that they were withholding is indeed exculpatory evidence that will help George. So then again, on June 1st, we get it again where the state provides some more evidence. And then again on June 14th, more evidence is coming. We're like, what the heck? And of course, they're telling us in a little footnote that the early discoveries, the witnesses were only described as numbers. Everything was redacted, and it was just very difficult to gather information or to get, to find out exactly what was said and who said it. It's pretty difficult when you say witness number 12 or, said this or that. I mean, how is the defense supposed to even gather the information and make it something that they can work with? So we have April 16th that they're asking for the information. Get some in the middle of May. Get some more in the beginning of June. Get some more in the middle of June. And then here again at the end of June, the state is giving the third supplemental. So you've got the discovery plus 3 supplementals. Then again on July 17th, the state files its 4th supplemental discovery. On the 25th, it files its 5th supplemental. So each time they're just giving them a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. On August 24th, again, August 8th, August 24th. Look at this. This is the 7th supplemental discovery. September 19th, the 8th one. So they just keep dribbling out little pieces, little bits at a time. So you can see the state is really dragging its feet. And each time they provide a little more, all it is just more evidence that they've been withholding stuff that we found out later, or we do find out, that they've had this information since the beginning. And that's what leads us into this next underlined section, a sample of discovery problems to date. The state had failed to include information that it had or should have had, or provided it in a form that was useless. The defense made all these requests, written and oral. Some of the requests finally get provided, but after weeks or months. Yet some of the discovery requests have just been denied or completely ignored without any explanation. Even though the state had agreed to in writing that they would respond. Okay, and the next section of that's underlined is expert depositions. This is where the defense catches the state actually hiding evidence, because remember, the state is supposed to not only provide all the evidence that the defense knows about, they're supposed to bring all the evidence out, everything, and set it right on the table and say, there you go, that's all we have, everything. But the state didn't do that. So right now, as far as I'm concerned, the state is in big trouble here. Just because you're the state doesn't mean that you can deny a man his rights. Defense had been asking the state for the information that they needed on Trayvon's cell phone recovered at the scene. The defense was in a room getting some information, and one of the investigators had walked in and let them know, the guy's name is Steve Benton, came into the room and said he had analyzed the phone while he was able to access the phone. When he was able to access the SIM card, but he was unable to access the internal memory because he couldn't get through the password. Yet Mr. Benton was not listed as an analyst to the state's discovery. The state had made specific requests for any reports that had been done. So the defense says that they received a disk on August 24th. Remember, all this was in hand in March. So here they are waiting until August with some files on it, but no report. So the defense asks, can we get a report on this thing? And they didn't get a response, nothing. So, the defense decides to schedule a deposition. And Mr. Benton comes in and sits down and he says, yeah, I analyzed the phone and I prepared a written report, which included the photos he took during his analysis, including the files he was able to find during the download. And Mr. Benton shows the report, later provides them with a copy, and testified that he had provided it to the FDLE, which is the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, investigator David Lee. So Mr. Benton does this back in March 26th, and the defense receives it on September 26th? That's 6 months. How can you get a fair trial if you can't even get the information? It's just not fair. And it's obvious that they're withholding this information because they're trying to drag this thing out. My opinion is that having this kind of racial tension in the country right now is helpful to Obama for his re-election bid. But this is really important. The copy of the downloaded files that the defense received from Mr. Benton at his deposition differed from the files provided from the state on August 24th. That's perjury. That's straight out lying. You're giving them different files than, what? But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Several other analysts revealed that at that deposition that they had notes, photos, data computation that had not been provided to the defense or were provided in a form that was indecipherable. Everyone should be outraged, completely outraged. I don't care if you think that this guy is the devil himself and horns are growing out of his face. I don't care. Do you want to be treated fairly by the courts? Do you want to be treated fairly when you're being held responsible for something that you may or may not have done? Do you want to have the rules applied to you fairly or not? Because look, all you guys that support putting George away for life, fine. That's just fine. But I hope that you guys will agree and join the rest of us when we condemn the state for this terrible miscarriage of justice. Absolutely. This is going beyond the case. This is now This is a travesty of justice. Okay, so anyway, the next section is the witness sketches. In the beginning, in February, they had interviewed a lot of people, and when they were interviewing them, in some cases they would have them draw a little diagram on a blank sheet of paper to give them an idea, the layout of the land, where they were in comparison to the sidewalk, stuff like that. And those sketches are very valuable information and totally information that would be required to create a proper defense. I mean, a perfect example would be if you've got a sketch with all the witnesses showing that all this stuff happened in the same place that George said it happened, and all the evidence and all these sketches are supporting George's story. Why would the state withhold them unless they're trying to deny George his rights? And if that's true, then whoever it is, because remember, you don't hold the state you can't hold the entire state responsible, but we can hold the people responsible, like Corey. I mean, she can be imprisoned for this kind of stuff. Let's face it, she doesn't have immunity just because she's a prosecutor. Prosecutors have the immunity as long as they're following the rules and doing the right thing. If they start stepping outside of the boundaries of the law and hiding exculpatory evidence or creating false evidence, they can go to jail for it, and they can be fined huge fines and lose their job, of course. And I would assume that that's going to be Corey's fate, unless somehow or another she can worm her way out of it and point her fingers at somebody else that will take the blame. But this right here, this is obviously a problem for the state and its officers that are in charge of this case. So the defense smartly refused to schedule depositions of those witnesses until the defense had obtained all those statements, including the drawings that had previously been made. Because, I mean, let's face it, why would you want to ask questions of a person unless you have all their previous statements in hand and any drawings they made, especially for the night after? So, I mean, when you ask the questions, you want to have that information so you can say, well, did you say this? And is this the drawing you made? Right? I mean, why wouldn't you want that information? Why would the state withhold it from you? So by refusing to schedule the depositions, the defense was able to force the hand of the state, and the state finally had to provide these drawings and stuff and all the statements, which came in discovery number 8 or 7. One of the drawings that they found was prepared by witness 6 that clearly shows that he saw Trayvon Martin on top of George Zimmerman on the concrete sidewalk, right where George Zimmerman said he was when Trayvon was bashing his head into the concrete. This is powerful exculpatory evidence that was withheld. The state had this information for 5 months and allowed a false narrative to be aired on the news media over and over and over again, knowing that they had this information and that they didn't even provide it to the defense. So the last section here is frustration and delay, and they're just really irritated and saying, the way the state is working, instead of just handing over all the evidence, they're saying, well, if you figure out something that we haven't provided, then you request it and we may or may not provide it. And that's how the state's been acting in this case. I mean, it's totally illegal. It's illegal. It's immoral. This man's life is hanging in the balance, and they're withholding the evidence that would free him. Evidence that the judge should have known before he made all these accusations and got his ass kicked off of the bench. I like how they say this haphazard and cavalier approach by the state and the failure of the state to timely respond to a reasonable defense requests has frustrated and delayed our discovery phase of this case. So their next section is they go over a lot of this information, and I'm going to flash through it. I'm making the video too long. I don't want it to be too long. They're asking for a senior judge to be appointed, someone who has plenty of time, because right now this court is so backed up, the docket's so backed up that they're going to need to bring out a lot of hearings just to force the state to provide the information that they need. For example, the defense has been trying to get the Facebook, Twitter, and the information from the FDLE, and the Department of Justice also has a lot of their entire investigation. We would really like to see all that information and find out exactly what they found. That's all part of discovery. You can bet the defense or that the prosecution has all this information. The defense is anticipating, a lot of litigation around those requests, and they intend to take depositions of several witnesses, and this is going to be a stinky little mess because, remember, a deposition is under oath. The state has to provide the witnesses, and the witnesses have to speak with the possibility of going to prison for lying. And you've got people like Benjamin Crump. Wouldn't that be great to see him on there getting questioned? Of course, they won't show it to us. Natalie Jackson and media consultant Ryan Julson. The people that have interviewed some of the witnesses and some of the people in this case. Once the media interviews witnesses in a case like that, they become like investigators, and the investigators have to avail themselves to the courts so the defense can question them. So that's all these people are going to have depositions. They're going to have to come and answer questions under oath. This is just going to be an interesting thing. So they're saying the court's going to be busy and we need a senior judge to come in and handle it. And they're asking that the court schedule regular hearings so that, all these things can be heard out and they will know that these hearings are coming up. The problem is, once you realize you need a hearing, then you have to schedule it, and the court's all backed up, so it could be weeks or months before you get to the hearing. So they're saying, let's just go ahead and get these things scheduled because we know there's going to be a ton of them anyway, and go ahead that way. As soon as something pops up, we can handle it right on the spot. And that's the end of the document. This is probably the most damning document for the state and for Corey's office, definitely. This is really going to be a problem for her. I noticed that the newspaper has talked about it, but very lightly. They're certainly not bringing out all the evidence and all the information. I'm assuming the people that are just watching the news are watching TV news or reading the newspaper. They're going to be without the true information, the solid information. Certainly, they're not going to be reading this document and discussing it on the internet with between people that already know most of the information. Every time there's been a discovery, we get the pieces. We know what there is. We know what the defense has so far. Most of the people that support Trayvon don't have those pieces of information, so they really can't comment. They're basing their statements and their feelings on what they saw on TV.